Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this session, we're going to have a look at a new plugin called Metric AB from ADPTR. So this is brand new. I just got access to a demo of it from the Plugin Alliance website. I have no idea what this is going to cost yet because I haven't listed the pricing, and I thought it was a good chance to check it out, learn a little bit about it, and see what I think of it in readiness for the release to see if I would like to purchase it. Now, this plugin is basically a reference checker, so it's an AB plugin. I've done a few reviews of reference plugins before, and I really like these plugins because they can give you some really great insight into your mix by comparing to actual mixes in the real world done by professionals, and it's the best way to see how your mix is stacking up. Even when you get really good at mixing, it's always advisable to keep using references because especially when you mix more and more, sometimes your ears will adjust, they'll go out of whack, your room might not be perfect, and you just need to make some comparisons to professional mixers to just make sure you're in the right ballpark with them. So yeah, this is another one. I have switched plugins before in the past, and if I like this one, I may switch again because sometimes these come up with new features or they work better than the previous ones. So I have in the past used the Magic AB from Sample Magic, which I liked, but then it got limited and some new features came out with another plugin by Master in the Mix called Reference, which I sort of like, and I did really like. But there's been a few bugs with it that have annoyed me, and it doesn't work as good as I originally thought when I first got it. So I'm hoping that maybe this one here will give me what I loved about the reference plugin, but in a more stable and a more advanced one with even some more features again. So we'll check it out in that regard. So I've had a very quick flick through the manual, and that's about it. So I'm going to be learning this as I teach it to you and show it to you. So hopefully we'll both learn from this, and you can make a judgment on whether you like the plugin or not, and I will as well. Now, obviously reference plugins can be a little bit boring. They're not something that usually tempts a lot of people to want to buy. I actually like them. I get excited about them because I guess just with me mixing so much, to be able to have a plugin that I can simply compare my music to other music, or even other versions of my own music. So if I want to compare my own mixes to see what the difference is between them, you can obviously do that with these plugins. So they're very handy. They just seem a little bit boring because they don't change the sound of your mix technically. Obviously they do, because if you don't like what you're hearing, you'll go and adjust your mix, but they're not doing anything fancy in that regard. So they can seem a little bit boring in that regard and not really something you want to jump out and buy. But I definitely do advise that you get some way to reference your songs to other songs very easily and quickly. And these plugins allow you to do that. So anyway, let's check it out and see what we think of this brand new plugin. Okay, so here we are. Here is the plugin itself. So I've just loaded it on my main output, my mix bus on my mix. So I'm doing this in a mix. Obviously we could do this mastering, and I mean, I probably would do it in both. I would do it in mixing and I would do it in mastering as well. And I would just take that into consideration for my levels and various things like that. So just looking at it, it's a very nice, clean interface. Yeah, I like the look of it. It's just very clean, and it looks like it has some very promising features, which we will run through. So I guess from the start here, we've got some presets here that we can save, load, whatever else. So that's going to be handy because I like to set up some presets for different genres or different styles or different artists, that sort of stuff. So that's always handy to have. There's some settings, which is pretty bare. So just enable tooltips or don't. And we have a button here so we can go for the small mode here. So we can obviously flick through our audio tracks here and some other settings. And then we have a full mode. We've got some meters here. So we've got our A and our B. So our A side is our mix, our DAW, and our B side is going to be our reference track. We can listen to various aspects of it. So when we're playing along, we can put it in mono. We can listen to the left, we can listen to the right, or we can listen to just the sides of the mix so that we can compare what we're hearing in the reference to our mix as well. And then we've got the big button here where we can flick between A and B. So A is blue and B is orange. Okay, so the main thing here is obviously we need to load some tracks in, and we've got all these spots here. And if we actually look at this in small mode here, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've got all of those. So we've got lots of slots to load tracks into. So that's very handy. This has got more slots than probably any other one that I've seen. And we can just click on this menu here and we can load audio files in. We can remove them, clear track settings, everything like that. When we click on one of these, it also switches over to it, but you can, manual states that if you hold the shift button when you click, it won't change and will just switch to that audio track. Yeah, so we can load our audio files individually like this, but what you can also do is you can just pull up some audio files, and in theory, you could drag it in there. The problem is with something like Cubase, when you do that, it disappears. So it's sort of hard to drag it in. But as I've just done, I've dragged it in from another screen and it all appears. So you can drag one file in, but you can also drag multiple and you'll see that it's placed it around. Now, normally I would do proper professional references, but for copyright issues and things like that for this video, I'm just loading up some of my own songs just for the sake of being able to demonstrate this and not get into any copyright problems. So you can see we're on the playback menu here, and you can obviously see an example of the waveform showing up here and what it looks like here. We can adjust our gain. So we could manually adjust the gain, and if you actually switch between them, that is individual per track. So this is where it would be handy to actually set the gain of each of the tracks and then save it as a preset so that it would automatically come back up at the time of when you need it. So it gives you some examples of some details here. It even tells you, so it tells you the format of the file here, the name, and also the LUFS value of the song, which is quite handy. So you'll see that it takes a little bit of time to calculate that LUFS, but it just zips through and obviously calculates it. So you can instantly see each one of those, and you can obviously remove some of these if you don't want them. So if you want to remove one, you can remove that audio file. I'm not sure if you can move them around. No, it doesn't look like you can. Okay, but the other great feature we've got is match. So if we put this back to 0, we just double click on it. If we go match, then it'll sit there and calculate, but we need to play some audio through it. Let's just say it failed. So we need to play the audio of the A channel, and then we can get it to match. So in this regard here, you might want to go for the loudest spot. So you can see it gained it at minus 4.9 dB. So let's just do that again. We'll just see if we get the same value when I do it at the loudest spot in the song. Okay, so obviously a big difference there because I had it in the quiet part of the song there. So we're minus 10.3 now, where we're comparing there. So a big difference. So obviously it's going to, you can do that match for every song. And yeah, that can be quite handy. I would probably do a match to say one set of songs or something like that, save it as a preset. But then when you go to actually do a comparison, you have to make a decision of whether you're going to rematch every time or whether you're going to adjust your mix to meet that level. So it depends on what sort of level you mix at. Do you consistently mix at the same sort of level, or do you do it differently? So that'll depend on how you set this match, or whether you lock in a certain level for the gain so that you're always trying to target that level. So if we just compare this song here, if we just look at it now, you can obviously see I've got it on the A. So this is our mix. And then if I switch, that's our reference. So you can hear the levels pretty comparative. And then you can look at the meters, they're very similar. So we could obviously switch into mono mode. Just listen to the left side. Listen to the right side. For the sides. And then we unclick and we're back to normal. So that's a good way to compare the differences of your mix compared to a professional mix. Check out how much content they have in the sides, how well their song plays in mono compared to how well your song plays in mono, which is a very critical thing to do these days, especially with the resurgence of mono devices like the Google and Apple and Amazon little audio boxes and things like that, and the Sonos stuff. A lot of those mono devices that consolidate stereo down to mono speakers. So very important to check that out. Okay, so we've got a rewind button here. So if we were playing along and we're up here, click rewind, straight back to the start of the song. We've got different playback modes here. So it defaults to latch, which basically means that it's sort of locked to the playing of the DAW. So this will not play unless I hit the play button in the DAW, which I just do by pressing the space bar for Cubase. So as soon as I hit play, it's playing. Even though we're not listening to it, it plays it. And we stop, it'll stop. We've got some other ones here, so we can go to cue mode, which is very similar to latch mode, except the difference is it'll start from a cue point, which we'll look at in a minute. So I'll come back to that. We have a sync mode. So this one here is supposed to sync to the timeline of the DAW. So if I was to move my cursor to a different spot in the DAW, then that would move this spot as well. So it's playing there, and you'll see there it jumped back. So this setting here is basically like an offset, so you can see as I'm adjusting it based on the time in the DAW, because I don't have the cursor in my DAW at 0, it's in a different spot. With this one here, you can see That's where it thinks the cursor is from a time value compared to the start of the song compared to the start of my mix. And you can see it jump backwards because of this setting. So that's sort of as a part of, whereas if I reset that, it just starts from there. So that's handy if you are comparing the same song, so mix to mix. So if you've got a mix A and a mix B, syncing it can be very handy because you can keep going through different spots in your mix, in your DAW, and this will link up. And then we've got manual mode here. So in manual mode, we get a play button appear. So we can click play and it's automatically playing without the DAW playing at all. So we can listen to that and there's nothing playing there. Play that. We can turn that off. And you can have one playing or not the other playing. So I'd most likely just leave this at latch and just set my cursor wherever I want it to start. That's the most likely I would do there. All right, so we need to do some cue points to get into the loop function here. And what we've got is we've got these 4 cue points here. So for instance, we could put our cursor, say here, and we put a 1. Okay, we could also do a 2, and that puts another cursor. So we could move these around to cue points, and we could put a cue point here and a cue point here, for instance. So you might put them in different spots of your songs, verse, chorus, bridge, outro, whatever you want to compare. You can have 4 points there, and you can click on them and move to the relevant point. And that is where this cue setting here came in. So we could set that to cue, and when we press play, it actually jumped to number 4 because I've got number 4 selected. So if I select one of these here, I move my cursor, I press play, jumps back to Q2, or we could jump back to Q1. Every time we click play, it will jump back to that cue point. So that can be handy. We can also set a loop function. And when we set that loop function, we can now adjust it from this cue point to, say, that one there, or we could do it there. And it will automatically loop in that section there. If we go to 2, we can set another loop point. So you might set a loop there. So you can see you can have a loop point for every cue. So we could set a loop, and you might want to loop that section there. And 4, you can loop again, and you might want to loop, say, that section there. So every time you go into this, you can set a different loop point. And when you have it on cue, you'll automatically jump to those loop points. Okay, so some of the other features of the loop here, we've got our loop set. So obviously I showed you we can drag the size of the loop, but we can also move it. So if we say, okay, that's the length I want, but I want to move it while retaining the length, what we do is we can just grab in there and we can move the loop around to any position we like. So you might want to say, okay, that came in a bit early. Let's set it to there. We can also use these half and double features here. So if we say go to loop 3, we could half that, or we could double it again, half it, half it, half it. So just some quick changes there. Instead of dragging, you might want to just quickly halve it or double it. Okay, and these buttons here are based on sort of like a bar setting. So if you had set your loop to like 16 bars, this is the example they use in the manual, you can then move that length forward. So if you had this loop set to, so let's imagine that was 16 bars. If I click that way, it's going to move it forward to the next 16 bars and the next 16, or backwards the 16 bars. Now you can also zoom in on the waveform by using your scroll on your mouse. So when I was just clicked in here, I can zoom all the way in to whatever detail I want or show the entire waveform. And then once you are zoomed in, you can see this top one here still retains the full waveform. So then you can actually move this section around to what is visible. So this little top section here is always going to be the same, the entire waveform, and just handy way to keep this zoomed in, but also allow you to move around the song. So we've got a filters section over here. So this is very good for comparing different parts of the song to get a vibe for how, like, your low end is competing with the proper mix, or how your other sections are there. So we've got various little settings there. So we can turn the filters on or off with the filters button. And then we've got our slope, or our Q, whatever you want to call it there. So we've got a 12 or 24. So we can set it to a low pass here, or a high cut. We can set it to a high pass or a low cut, or we can set it to a band pass, which is basically both a high and low cut, or low pass, high pass together. We can change our frequencies manually here, but we've also got some presets that we can say we want the low mid, and you'll see that it adjusted those instantly there. We could say the mid or the high. We could go the sub bass or the bass, and then reset. So they're giving you some common values here, but you can just click in there and scroll as well to get your own style there. And obviously they set the higher and low part, which comes into play in the band pass mode only. Obviously, depending on which one of these you pick will depend on whether it's concentrating on the high or the low. So let's have a play with this and see what it actually does. So you can hear there instantly, and it doesn't matter which one we go to. I've got it set to the sub, so depending on what you listen to will depend on whether you hear anything. But we can change to the bass. And as you can hear there, we can also change the settings there. So as I said, depending on what settings you use, so in the case of this one here, if you look at the highs, we've got a range of 22K to 4K. So if we're in bandpass, that's what it's going to set. It's going to set a range of 22 to 4K. So we'll just have a look at our meters over here. Let's just turn the filters off for a second. We've just got some values there for peak, RMS, and obviously it's moving around. So it's giving us our values there, giving us an idea of what we're looking at. And as I said, you can make it compact, and you can see there, you get the little name come up as I'm scrolling over the options. So we could flick between songs. And this is even our cue points here. So that's handy there, that we can flick between the cue points or we can flick between the songs in the compact mode.